Hi, I'm John Paul, and a really warm welcome back to my channel. And today I'm continuing with a series of conversations with therapists, in this case, actually trainee therapists, looking at career change, what it's like becoming a therapist, why, those kind of things, and talking to specific people about their processes too, what their experiences are like, sort of challenges, anxieties, of course, the things that they enjoy about it as well. I'm really pleased to have today trainee therapist Richard Campbell. So thank you for coming on, Richard.
Hello, how are you
Uh,
doing?
Good, thank you. Good. And what we're going to do is just going to look at why you're becoming a therapist, and then your process, as I say, any challenges and anxieties. Because I think, from my point of view, it's been sort of 10 to 15 years since I was training, so it can be quite difficult to remember what things were like actually. So I think it's always good. There's a lot of people that listen to this channel who are either thinking of training or in training. So
hmm
the kinds of things that you'll be thinking about are probably going to be very real for them at the moment. So just going back to the sort of beginning, so to speak, in terms of your journey, what was it? What happened that made you think you'd like to become a therapist?
Well, as I've said on a couple of other things that I've done, I'm not 100% sure still that I want to become a therapist, which is
Mhm.
maybe all part of the process. It's something that I've become extremely interested in, and I've kind of almost completely thrown myself into this world of therapy, and it's something that I feel completely engaged in.
Mhm.
But maybe jumping a bit ahead straight away here, but I'm almost, I have some anxieties about what the outcome's going to be after studying. So just to give you a little bit of
Sure.
background, I'm sort of a regular guy, I guess, who has a job, and I've been in the same job for about nearly 14 years. I work in technical sales. So it
Mhm.
couldn't be, well, I was going to say it couldn't be more different from a job in therapy, but actually there's potentially some similarities. Um,
Okay.
and then after doing that for a long time, it's a little bit tricky to exactly fathom out why. But about a year ago, I had a bit of a moment where I suddenly just almost just hit a wall with what I was doing. And it's a little bit tricky to describe, but I almost had this moment where I looked at the end of my life and I thought, if all I've achieved throughout my whole life is a fully maintained house and a final salary pension, I've kind of thrown it all
Mhm.
away. So that was the first sort of, I don't know, the first thing that sort of made me start looking around for something else. And then actually, I just stumbled across an introduction to counselling course, which I'd never had any ideas about doing anything like that before, but I decided to enroll on that, and it just absolutely just lit me up, and I felt that I'd found my
Okay.
tribe. They were talking about all the sorts of
Mhm.
things that I like talking about and thinking about and listening to on podcasts and all that. So I was just like, wow, I've actually found something that I'm interested in.
And in terms of just picking up on a couple of things that you said, you mentioned uh, uh, not the biggest thing of the things that you said, but it's interesting. You said about technical sales that there are actually similarities because there is a concern that people have when they're going and changing career that sort of all is lost, if you know what I mean. It wasn't somehow everything that they'd done before was not worth doing it. Certainly, from my own personal experience, going from a lawyer to therapist, it's almost as if people experience it as you suddenly start from scratch again. But one thing I would say, certainly, even from law to therapy, is there are skills and qualities that I developed as being a lawyer, which are helpful
Mhm.
from the point of view of running a private practice as a therapist. Even just the sort of private practice side of things, but also things around boundaries. I mean, there's more I could say around it. But so when you said about some things that would be similar, what might they be?
Well, listening to people would be the first one. So,
Okay. Yeah.
it's something that I very quickly discovered in selling. So, well, a quick little story is when I first began in sales, it's technical sales. So it's about
Hmm.
specifying control systems. And I used to go in and see clients and basically take some big technical sales binder in and start talking at them through all this technical data and telling them everything that we could do and all this kind of thing. And I very Well, I say quickly realised it probably actually took me a few years to work out that actually people didn't need me or want me to talk at them. And if I was
Hmm.
just quiet, they would talk at me and tell me all sorts of things about their business and about their life and everything. And it would completely change the relationship, I guess.
Sure.
So it very quickly became about me saying as little as possible in some ways and just
Hmm.
building those relationships like that. So that would be one thing. I'm also a believer that
Hmm.
nothing's wasted really. So whatever you do, and I think I'm 47 now, so I feel on the one hand I have a little bit of panic thinking I need to crack on and do this because I'm getting a bit older. But on the other hand, I think having that age and experience of different things in life, hopefully, I mean, this might be very naive of me, but I'm hoping that that might add some value to being a therapist.
So do you mean as far as kind of life experience there, things that you've gone through, how helpful that will be with
Yeah,
clients?
absolutely. Just life experience, jobs, careers, what it's like getting older and how that's going to impact on career,
Mm.
raising a family, financial concerns and hopes and dreams and disappointments and highs and lows and just the whole thing. You kind of get to my age and you've probably seen a few things, I guess.
You said you did the course and or doing the course, and you felt like you found your tribe. Can you just say a bit more about that? People who like to talk about the things that you're interested in as well. Just to say a bit
Yeah.
more about that. I think what's going to be very helpful as well, as I've said, from the point of view of people who are listening, is the kind of challenges and anxieties
Hmm.
that come up for you and that continue to be. I mean, you said you're not even sure if you'll continue. So just to say, I notice on YouTube a far more searched and watched video is why I'm no longer a psychotherapist. When people are coming into the profession, I can see that very much those doubts, concerns, worries are very much at the forefront. And it's a
Hmm.
very helpful part of us, isn't it, to be asking those questions, to be curious about how things will be funded, what will life be like.
Mm.
I also think that those can dominate for people, and in some ways they change our perception of ourselves. In fact, perhaps underestimate us, underestimate our trust in the world, those kind of things. So there's always that line that people are walking, I think, of listening to their doubts and their fears, relating to
Mhm.
them, taking the information that they need to from them, and then deciding what they're going to do. And it is an ongoing process, isn't it? There's something very unknown for
Yeah.
most people about the world that they might be stepping into. But yes, just going back to that you did the course, that you've been doing the course, and there is very much something that still draws you to it, or in
Absolutely.
fact, you found something that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
What
just
would that have
just
been?
taking a little step back there. I mean, you might have seen the video by Danny Mackler, which is why I quit being a therapist. Which is
Okay.
if you've not seen it, it's worth a watch. And actually, far from putting me off carrying on with this, it was actually one of the videos, including one of the videos that you put up, which spurred me on to go and look at the whole thing. So it's always good to look at the
Mhm.
positives and negatives.
Yeah.
I mean, when I went to this introductory course, I was extremely nervous about doing it because I'm an introverted kind of person and I was putting myself in that college environment again. But what I was interested in was people were talking about what I would refer to as real life, real things that affect people,
Hmm.
how people interact with each other. And I think I've mentioned this before in other things, but I somehow feel when I have those conversations, I'm kind of on firmer ground. It's like more relevant to me, I suppose, than sort of surface conversation. Um,
Sure.
so being with a group of people who were actually prepared to have those conversations was pretty amazing, actually. Um, and then hearing about all different people's different routes to how they'd become interested in therapy and everything like that, but there was still a lot of anxiety about it, and I would say perhaps the biggest thing was worrying about people's perception of why, thinking, well, why would you want to be a counselor? And
Mm.
I suspect a lot of it, and I think I did this myself. I kind of went in with the sort of disguise on of I want to go in and help people. You know, that's something virtuous to sort of do. And what I discovered is actually most people are there because they struggled with things themselves. They've maybe had help themselves, and they feel that they can maybe continue that and help other people. So another thing I quickly realized was that I didn't have to pretend to have it all together and be this sort of
Sure.
stable presence that could help everyone. So that was good. That was a good first step. But then that led to like another bump in anxiety, which is, oh, actually, I've got to do some personal development and maybe unravel some parts of myself and really start thinking about who I am. So I would say that that has caused me a steady amount of anxiety as I've been working through the course, and I think it's going to get
Okay.
worse. On level 3, I believe it steps up
Okay.
again, and they really start pulling you
So
apart.
at what stage are you turning you inside out? Somebody used that phrase, but what stage are you at the moment then, as far as how far you're in and how much have you got left practically?
Yeah, okay, so I've done the introductory course, and that was a level 2, if that means anything to you. I'm now doing a level 3 course, which is 12 months. And if I
Okay.
get through that, I then start a 2-year course, which is level 4. But that's when, once you get onto the level 4 course, that's where it really becomes quite serious, I suppose, in terms of time. So really, you're looking at taking a day off work if you've got a full-time job. You would have to be in
Sure.
therapy yourself, pay for supervision, do placement work, pay for the course, and everything. So at that point, it becomes a serious financial commitment and sacrifice in terms of, you know, if you reduce your working hours, for example, that's going to have a big impact on finances. So that is a big step. I think it's something that most people on the course are starting to think about, and I suspect a few will fall by the wayside. Some because of the financial impossibility of it, but also just the time commitment and many other things. So it's a really interesting one because in some ways the battle, maybe that's not the right word, but the sacrifice and the journey that you have to go on to make it as a therapist, I imagine that all adds to your experience, which would hopefully mean that you could help other people going through similar challenges.
Definitely. I think that's a very helpful thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But just going back practically, so you've got three, is it 3 years then? And
So
that
it's, yeah,
last
three
year,
years
you did
left
an
in
introductory
total.
course plus the three.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And at the last year, you would need to stop working or at least not work for a day a week.
I'd have to take a day a week off, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I mean that's the other thing. It's you have to weigh up what impact that's going to have on your career. You know, how well is
Yeah.
that going to go down with you with your employers? And it's a really difficult thing to do. But I imagine that this isn't just exclusive to people that want to become therapists. I imagine it's anybody doing some sort of career
Of
change.
course.
And then I think the big worry, and this is perhaps a more philosophical question in some ways, is that you could make some huge sacrifices, some financial sacrifices, some mental ones in a way, you know, really put yourself through the mill, and there is a reasonable chance that you will come to the end of it and go, that was a mistake. Or I shouldn't have done
Okay.
it, or
Okay.
you know. But then again, it's never wasted, is it? Anything that you pursue is you're going to learn some lessons along the way. So it's very much that, you know, just heading out into the unknown and just trying to follow your sort of instinct and you know, take that journey and just. But it's kind of blind faith in some ways.
Sure. Yeah. And I suppose in the meantime, there are practical things. We said that fear part, the anxious part, is going to ask some good questions, isn't it? And so for you at the moment, what would the main anxieties be? What is it that you're most concerned about?
I mean, finances are obviously a concern, but I think again that could apply to whatever you're doing in life when you're seeking to change something. that there's always going to be a financial risk, and also there's always a risk as well if you don't do anything with your life and you just keep doing the same thing. So I think you're lulling yourself into a false sense of security by thinking, there's never a financial risk, or there's no financial risk if you sit there and do nothing. So that would be up there. I think the other thing is actually just doing that deep work that you need to do to become a therapist. And I can already see that I think that potentially some people there's an opportunity to not do a good job of it, I think, the personal development, and almost like skip over it in some ways and go, oh, I'm okay with that, and this is how I feel about that area of my life, and this is what I think about relationships, and perhaps not be totally honest with yourself just to get through the course and do the assignments and everything. But I suspect if you actually want to do a good job and be a decent therapist and actually extremely helpful to people, I think, well, you know better than me, John Paul, but I'm guessing you have to be pretty honest with yourself and absolutely put yourself through it and sort everything out. I'm interested actually how that side of it was for you.
I mean, as far as sorting everything out, I suppose I would always have had a keen eye on requirements as far as the course, coming from a legal background as well. I do think there was an amount that was taught on the course. It was integrative, but there was a transpersonal course as well. So there were some things I connected with much more than others. I mean, I probably said on other podcasts that it was really since that. There's certainly elements that I would have taken from those 4 or 5 years, certainly elements that I would have incorporated into what I would say my frame would be as far as how I see myself in the world, and therefore what I'm often filtering things through when I'm speaking to clients. But that, in some ways, that sort of started after qualifying. So I think it's a very important part of the process from the point of view of the things that you do learn. There are things that I remember, not just things that were sort of taught components to the course, but we did visualizations, creative imagination, and we would do them sort of on ourselves, if you know what I mean. So internal masculine, internal feminine, and I can still see those images now about what an internal masculine looks like, internal feminine. So, for example, so there are certainly things that I learned on the course that would still be around for me that I would, during that time of therapy as well, would still remember. But it is very much an ongoing process, I would say, and it sort of picks up, has a cumulative effect and benefit as time goes on. Would be my experience. The more client work you do, the more connected you feel to self and others. I think the more connected you feel to self and others, the less anxious things are from the point of view of the business and those kind of things. So the process for me, I was at times a bit dubious during the training. I did in the second year, the place that I was training, look at other places as well. But I stayed, and I'm glad that I did. We did group therapy in the third year, I think, which I thought was great. And there were lots more things that I connected to throughout the third and fourth year. But and the thing that I would always say as well is that being a therapist, from my point of view, is quite different to the sorts of things that happen during an academic training. The course that I did was very experiential, so they were doing what they could as far as the personal development side of thing, which is so important to sit with somebody else who's going through a process of change as well. So they're trying to facilitate that change in you in some ways. Lots of things that were beneficial, but I suppose it really would have been more with the client work and sitting down with clients. It has a different feel to it, sitting with another person and working through something with them, as opposed to sitting through and working through your own material, which was really much more.
Sorry to interrupt you there. There was something that you mentioned there, being dubious about certain things, and I think I've heard you talk about this before, or maybe we had a conversation before, and that's actually been quite helpful to me, because I'm somebody that listens to. Well, here's the thing. So you have to follow a curriculum or these things that you're being taught to get your assignments done and all this sort of thing. And sometimes when a claim is made about something, I find it extremely difficult to just accept it. So, for example, the
Sure.
lesson might say humans act like this, and we know that they act like this because of that. And I think, really, that's one school of thought, and there's
Yeah.
we could literally go off
Yeah.
in so many directions about it. Um, and then it's come back to me what you've said a couple of times about you kind of that's okay. You can kind of do the work, pass the assignments, get the course, get the qualifications, and then you can start to have your own thoughts about things and your own style of therapy, I suppose. So that's been really interesting for me because that's there is so much out there, so many different schools of thought, and that is can be quite overwhelming, I think, for trainees. It's just like well, what direction do I want to
Well,
go in?
absolutely, and that there's a couple of things there. I think, isn't it? It wouldn't be the case for everybody, but for quite a lot of people coming into therapy, I suppose for me, I'd been in a work environment where I'd done something which I wasn't really that into for a long time. So my values, what I was doing, how I was experiencing myself and the world, would not have been a set of values actually that was navigating things brilliantly for me.
Hmm.
So people
Hmm.
come in very open to what's happening, which is important, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you also get somebody teaching existential, somebody psychoanalytic, and that's their thing. So, and some of them, there's similarities between all of them, but there are also some quite significant. They can, I think, feel they have different flavors and feels to them. So,
Yes.
working out what is you as a therapist, what's your kind of paradigm, how you see yourself in the world. And it might be a bit of psychoanalysis. It might be something from there. It might be from existential, or it might, there's plenty of things. I see counselling directory have listed another 10. I might be exaggerating, but things that people can tick in terms of modalities. In the
Yeah.
last year or two, there are probably things that didn't even exist
Mm.
that when I was training that are now around as far as ways of working with clients. Bearing in mind, of course, I think the thing that's most helpful, which we would all say, is the relationship actually and what
Yes.
happens there and the communication and the honesty and the boundaries and those kind of things, as much as the modality and theory. But
Mm.
I think it can be very difficult with people coming in because there is as with all sort of learnings and academic trainings, it's almost as if we have to do this or be like this, learn this, remember this in order to do it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I certainly think there are very important things that people will take from their training, which they'll use throughout, that make sense, that touch them based on
Yeah.
their experience and
Yeah.
based on how they see themselves in the world. And over time, that forms and becomes more solid, and other things get added. That was my experience of it, certainly,
Yeah.
and has been
Yeah.
since. And there are things. I just did my reaccreditation. Actually, every 5 years we get reaccredited, and I had to present a piece of CPD, continuing
Hmm.
professional development. We have to do 40 hours at least a year.
Okay.
And so we have to talk about a specific piece of CPD. And the piece that I talked about was delivering a bit of training, a bit of sort of facilitating a workshop at a local group that I go to.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons it was so significant, I was talking about the kind of model that I would use often, the sort of protection, reward, connection way of seeing people. But this person who was also in the group said these three things in quick succession, which I have never forgotten since. They sort of something suddenly made much more sense. I will have used them with clients since.
Mhm.
So it is that thing. It's very much an ongoing process
Yes.
as well. But they add to, I guess, the frame that I would have. So nothing significantly is changing. I don't think. Oh, that I don't agree with any of that anymore.
Mm.
But certainly, I do think it's very much an ongoing process. It's not going to be finished
Yes.
when you qualify.
Yeah, which
If
is
you know what I
something that
mean.
I also like about the field. I like the fact that you could spend the rest of your life learning about it. And I was talking to a couple of friends the other day, actually. I went away with a couple of friends, and we were talking about work and they're in sort of practical jobs, and they were. This is going off on a bit of a tangent, but they were talking about how they kind of use motivators to get through the next bit of work and the next. When I've done that, I'm going to have a cup of tea. When I've done this and this, I'm going to have my lunch and all this. And I
Yeah.
thought to myself, I really don't want my life to be like that. I want to be so engrossed in what I'm doing that there's not enough hours in the day, and I'm looking at the clock going, oh,
Sure.
crikey, I wish I had some more time to work on this. And I think
Hmm.
therapy, I think there's so much potential to be in that zone during your working day. It can
Hmm.
just go on and on and on. But just going back to what you were saying about all these different modalities and which direction can you take, an interesting bit of research that I've heard a few times, and this probably comes from On Becoming a Person, the Carl Rogers person-centered therapy book, which is what you've said, which is it's fundamentally it's about the relationship and
Yeah.
the rapport you're going to have with someone. And while all these other things are important, they aren't actually very useful unless you've got that connection with somebody else. So
Mhm.
so what
Yeah.
the way I'm trying to help myself with that is saying, look, go out and learn all this stuff, but if it's getting too much or it feels like everybody else is more academic than you, that's okay, because you can keep coming back to this central idea, which is about sitting down, you and another human being, and talking. I mean, that's what it is at its core, isn't it?
Completely. And yeah, well, connecting fundamentally, isn't it? So I remember somebody saying to me about when in supervision, and they said they were told, their supervisor told them, back to empathy all the time, back to empathy. If there's a struggle, or things don't seem to be as connected as they might be, because I think it is important. Of course, there'll be ruptures. That's human relationship, isn't it? It can
Yeah.
be a very helpful thing to happen in therapy. But fundamentally, I think the pattern does need to be connection, and listening, empathy is one of the key components of that. So rather than necessarily a theory or an idea or that always
Hmm.
holding, going back to empathy, listening to somebody, what's their experience. Somebody's written, I was just saying about recording another video about things that I have learned being a therapist, and they were asking about working with difference and people of different religions, spiritualities, and what that's
Okay.
like. So in the next video that I do, I'll talk about that there. So yeah, it's interesting. We might think that we need to fix something or be in that position to do that, but
Mm.
actually, I think the focus is on the relationship and how to facilitate. I think that's what Carl Rogers is doing: a
Yeah.
connected relationship with another human being, and to sustain it as well at the same time as being honest, not
Hmm.
colluding. If there is
Hmm.
something that does look like a difficulty, not ignoring it in order
Hmm.
to keep the relationship connecting. So I think honesty, boundaries, those things are fundamental as well.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
yes, so just sort of going back to your journey, you said you're in two minds about it as far as continuing.
Hmm.
Is that everything that you said up until now about what concerns about whether it will work out or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably just going to go for it. That's the overriding feeling at the moment, and to a
Mhm.
certain extent, I think at some point you have to make a commitment and jump into it, and somewhat announce to everyone, this is the direction I'm going to take, and everybody can go, are you sure you want to do that? And I think you've got to be strong
What
enough,
do you
haven't
imagine
you,
will
to...
happen?
Pardon, sorry?
Yeah. What do you imagine will happen about that? Have people said to you, why are you doing that?
Well, I've actually not talked to many people about it. This is the funny thing. I'm obviously on Substack talking about it, and I have a podcast. I'm on your podcast, so I'm out in the public domain discussing it. But actually, with the people that are around me day to day, it's not something that I actually talk about too much. Um,
Okay.
so I don't know why that is, but yeah, I think at some point I'm going to just have to make the commitment to do it. Um, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because sometimes you almost, if you feel drawn towards something, despite your own anxieties about it, you still kind of know it's going
Mm.
to happen. So it's like you're being pulled
Yeah.
towards it in some ways, and it's like, okay, I feel,
Yes.
I'm going down this path. I'm being pulled along. I
Yeah.
don't quite know what's going to
Yes.
happen, but it'll be all right, I'm sure.
It will work out. I mean, yeah, I was. It's such an interesting thing come up because I would tell my stories, on various podcasts, and I would actually, by describing the story to some people, even more recently, things I became more conscious about the journey in some ways, because I wanted to actually, when I came out of university, I wanted to get a job in HR. That was what I was applying for. So you might say combining kind of people, whatever the reality of that would be, with kind of business. But actually, there was a recession at the time. Probably, maybe I didn't
Okay.
interview as well as I could have done. Either way, I went into law as a result of that. And then when I was in law, I started to want to go into connecting with other people from the point of view of doing professional support. So
Okay.
training more kind of seeing client management, relationships, those kind of things. So I can see that from my point of view, and of course it's totally anecdotal, there was always a drive to be more connected to myself and other people, to be more in relationship, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
might have been about a perception of what HR would have been, or being a support lawyer would have been, but it did make me realize, having done that, that reflecting on it, that something has always been carrying me through towards feeling more connected with myself and other people. And I think that is what being a therapist fundamentally is about, actually.
Yeah.
That process, which is why it helps clients, but it also, I think, helps the therapist too in
Yeah.
life. It is a place where two people can be, and both be, however you look at it, I suppose, co-regulated. That feels good for both people.
Yeah.
That's not what it's not for my client's responsibility to make me feel good. There is just something about having a connected relationship
Yeah.
where there's emotional intimacy, vulnerability, honesty. Of course, it's different boundaries wise to friendships or romantic relationships, but there's something about that feels good. And I think something within me was always driving me towards it. Maybe it could have looked like something else, job wise, but for me, it was this. Yeah.
I can relate to that totally, and I think I might have said it earlier on, that I know that if I have deep and meaningful conversations, for want of a better expression, I feel on solid ground with people. I'm like, this is the stuff of life, and I'm happy to listen to people and have those conversations. But that's another thing actually that was just surprising about the whole counselling course, is that most people who go on it think that they're good at listening to people, and then you quickly realise that actually you're probably not as good as you thought. You have to learn about empathy, and something that I realised quite quickly is that when somebody is talking to me, the sort of internal monologue that's going on, and my thoughts and feelings and how I'm reacting to what they're saying, and trying to learn the lesson that, it's not about how I feel, it's about how they feel, and trying to do that sort of empathic response to people. So we all think we're good listeners until we start learning about it. And again, I suppose It's like anything, isn't it? When you start learning something new, everybody goes and does it because they're interested in it. They think they're potentially good at it. And then the first thing that happens really, as soon as you get a little bit of knowledge, it kind of breaks you down, and you go, oh, actually, I know nothing about it. I'm, potentially not very good at it. And you kind of have to start from the ground up, which also leads me to say that the courses so far that I've done, it almost feels like one almost continuous interview. So everything that you're learning each week, there's almost this sort of underpinning, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you cut out for it? What about this? Have you thought about it in this way and that way? And almost, obviously they're not trying to catch you out, but almost whatever you say and whatever opinion that you might have, it quickly gets deconstructed and shown back to you as to why you're probably wrong. Maybe it's just me.
Okay. I would hope also that somebody's affirming your skills and qualities and those things too.
Yeah, there is some of that, but I always like to. I always look at the more negative side of it. So, not the negative side of it, but the what bit am I getting wrong? I suppose would jump out to me a little bit more.
Sure. Okay. You mentioned Substack and your podcast. So you have a blog. I guess you describe it as talking about the process and what things are like for you in the journey, and also a podcast,
Yeah,
which hopefully we'll be recording in the soon.
few days. Yeah.
So yeah, can you say a bit about that?
I'm trying to think how it actually came about. I do know how it came about. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one of the podcasts I listen to is called. I'm going to get mixed up with mine now. It's not Everyday Therapist. Therapist Corner, it's called, and it's hosted by somebody called Sarah
Okay.
Reese. So she's got a lot of stuff out there on Spotify. So I started listening to her podcast, and she mentioned this thing called Substack, which is where she has a therapist sort of community of people that chat and exchange ideas. And her whole thing is about her business is basically about how to set up in private practice. So I started looking at that and found the whole Substack format, for want of a better word. I just found it really interesting and thought it's an idea I've had for a while actually, which is sort of writing down how I feel about certain things. So I thought it's a perfect time to start. And I'm going to create a Substack page, and it's going to be about my therapy journey, or as in training to become a therapist. And the idea was to build a community of people who are training to be therapists and try and offer some sort of help and guidance. And I don't know, put some stuff up there, but it quickly took a turn, and I realized that there's plenty of other resources out there that do that way better. So it's basically just become me rambling on about bits and pieces. And so I don't know, the direction of that, but it's something I'm going to continue to do. And then off the back of that, a guy, Cody Northup from America, he approached me, and I don't know whether it's for a joke or something, but he just said, "Should we do a podcast?" And I said, "Okay." And so we started doing that. That's called Everyday Therapist, and we've been doing that for about 3 months, and that's just been a complete surprise, and it's lots of fun to do. I'm getting to talk to all sorts of people. And it's great because it was completely unexpected. And another thing that was nice about it is that I've never wanted to do a podcast, had no designs on doing anything like that. So in some ways that's been great because it's been zero pressure. It was just like plug your microphone in, turn up and just talk. So that's going pretty well, and it's been fun.
I think there is that sort of telling your story thing that you're talking about, the Substack as well, isn't it? I just think is so important as well. And telling the story about something which is you feel emotionally connected to.
Yeah.
I guess is I would always encourage people to do that. Whatever form, I guess therapy ultimately is that people that tell their stories. I think that's the thing that enables a lot of emotional connection in therapy. So yeah, and then certainly I suppose bringing it into relationship in a podcast too. Is a great idea as well.
Yeah.
So you're
And the
enjoying
podcast,
them?
it's been really interesting as well because again, all this personal development stuff, and you get to my age and you think, really, I should stop worrying about what other people think of me, which is all part of personal development. So to put yourself out there on a podcast and go, this is me, this is what I think, and there you go. Just put it out into the world. So that's been kind of nerve-wracking and exhilarating at the same time. And I think it probably makes you a little bit braver because each time you put out a recording, podcast, YouTube video, blog post, and your life doesn't end, you get a little bit stronger and a little bit braver.
Yes. Yes, completely. You don't get, verbally or physically attacked
Well, yeah, not yet.
by
Not
horses.
yet.
People. Has generally the response been pretty good then from people?
Absolutely, yeah. I was actually thinking the other day that I haven't had a negative response yet. So, I know it'll come at some point, and I'll probably say something that I regret as well. Because that's the other thing with doing podcasts and things like this as well. It's always a risk. You don't know which way the conversation's going to go. You don't know what you're going to say. And we live in a world of sort of cancel culture at the moment as well. So there's that kind of fear of, am I going to express a an unpopular opinion, and people are
Yep.
going to disconnect and everything. So it's a risk, but it's one that I'm quite enjoying taking on a weekly basis, and we'll see where it goes.
And hopefully we won't be cancelled for
Well, hopefully not.
anything.
No, we can always edit.
Well, look, we're coming to an end sort of timing wise. Thank you so much for sort of
Thank you for
taking us
having me.
through the journey. As I said, so interesting as far as the challenges and anxieties as well. A video that I've got up there, which seems to be very watched, is about the great things about being a therapist, and also it's really important, isn't it, to look at, because that's what's going to be most prominent for people who are not yet practicing. I think,
Yeah.
I mean, some people may choose not to do that, but I do think it is very difficult to know what something will feel like when we haven't felt it. That's always and also bearing in mind that it feels like that for me, but it may not feel like that for someone else. That's always
Yes.
really interesting. I think a lot of the people that would speak very highly of being therapists will have been doing it for a while, and therefore, we're working with the kind of clients that they like. They've sort of developed the kind of theory that they're comfortable with and they think works for them. And I do think that's very different, isn't it, potentially, to being at that training stage when there's a lot of outward in academic pressures, financial pressures. I mean, that might be the case throughout for people, but so I think it's been really interesting to hear, the kind of challenges and anxieties as well.
What I would like to say is that I feel like, I've probably talked mainly about the negative side and the fears and anxieties and everything. And I just anybody who's looking into this, obviously I've not qualified yet, but it is great. It's so interesting. I've met so many good people, and I feel really excited to be on a journey towards doing something new. So there is that other side, it's not all negativity and anxiety. It's just that I think if anything's worth doing, it's usually difficult, and it's good to think things through. So I would say if people are interested in the field, is just booking yourself into an introduction into counselling course. It's it's a really good thing to do.
Great. Which is a nice note to end on, I think. So thank you so much, Richard. It's been great, really interesting. And we will speak soon. As I say, I'll be coming onto your podcast. If people want to look at the Substack or the podcast, what are the names of them?
Yeah, if you go onto Substack and go to everydaytherapist.substack.com, I can't actually remember my own domain name, but if you go on there, you'll see me as one of the people on there. Or you can just put it into Google. If you just write Everyday Therapist, we come up as one of the top ones. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you. And we will speak again soon.
Yeah.
You take care.